Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And tonight is our Game Week 38 National League preview and predictions. As you can see tonight, I'm not joined by my usual co-host in Paul Franklin. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Ryan. Of course, probably not the best time to get you on with Tuesday night's result, but thanks for joining me, Ryan, and filling in to do the predictions this week.
Yeah, not a problem at all, Luke. I'm no replacement for Paul, but I'll do my best. I'll do as best as I possibly can.
Yeah, I suppose we could start with Scunthorpe, I suppose, on Tuesday night when we look at them. 2-1 defeat to Sutton. I felt that must be so frustrating for you, particularly, when you consider, you're finally getting that win away from home at Yeovil. Quite a healthy win, I'll say. Back at your place, you'd think Sutton at home, a struggling side. It's been very inconsistent. Surely that's 3 points to help you build a bit of momentum. But of course, it wasn't the case. And I didn't message you at the best time either to ask you to come on this podcast because I think the last minute goal had just gone in. So I do apologise about that as well.
It's all right, Luke. One step forward and 2 steps back a little bit. I think is the best way to sum it up. The first half again was really poor. I didn't think both sides were great in that first half, to be honest. I actually had neck ache at the game. The ball spent that much time in the air rather than on the ground. It started to give me a neck ache. But second half was a little bit better. Obviously Sutton got the goal just after half time. Another mistake, another individual error, giving the ball away in bad areas. But the most frustrating part was that we responded almost straight away, and you're thinking, right, go on and at least get a point from the game, but try and win it. And then we get hit with a late sucker punch at the end of the game. I would say that over the course of the game, probably a draw was a fair result, a fair reflection. But if you don't deal with balls into the box, like we don't seem to be doing at the moment, then you're going to be punished for that at this level. And that's what Sutton did. From their perspective, they'll be buzzing. It's a good way for them to bounce back after Saturday's horror show for them against Morecambe. I think another probably 1 win, maybe 2, will be enough for them in terms of safety this season. So yeah, they'll be delighted. Not good enough from our perspective. I know Andy Butler said that in his post-match press conference. What wasn't good enough. They need to bounce back on Saturday now. We've got Altrincham at home, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, where we need to get a result, because what we don't want to do is end up embroiled in a playoff race kind of thing. We've got a good gap at the moment, and we still do have a good gap to Halifax and Southend. I know Southend have got a couple of games in hand, of course, although they don't seem to be taking advantage of those at the moment either. But we do need to get back on it as soon as possible and make sure we wrap the playoffs up. As I said last time, it's been a successful season anyway, regardless of what happens now. But I'd be really disappointed if we didn't make the playoffs from the position that we were in. Do I think we'll win the playoffs? Probably not, to be honest with you. But I'd like to be here to find out. I think it'd be a shame not to be able to do that now, really. So fingers crossed for a better performance and a better result on Saturday, because neither was there on Tuesday night, unfortunately. But massive credit to Sutton. Good bounce back for them after their defeat to Morecambe, of course.
Yeah, the perfect bounce back. I suppose that would have been quite damaging for them, losing by 5 goals on your own patch as well, to a side that, of course, have improved, but, are still within the bottom 4 at the moment. Please remember to like and subscribe, everyone. We're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so if you could help us out, you'd be really doing us a massive favour. And if you're watching this afterwards, get yourselves in the comments and give us your predictions for this upcoming game week. We'll come to the live chat now and see what you guys have been saying. Ben, of course, the Rochdale fans in tonight. Evening, gents. Welcome to the stream. We've had Lee as well in tonight. Said, your evening, lads. I won 2,500 at Cheltenham off £3. Lucky 15. To be fair, Cheltenham is the first year I could actually bet if I wanted to, but I don't know why. Conwy Bourne, it just doesn't really appeal to me betting. It's probably because I don't know enough about horse racing to bet on that overall. But a few of my friends are doing that at the moment. Are you a betting man, Ryan, for Cheltenham?
Yeah, I don't mind a few. I prefer not to talk about it though, because I ain't done very well this week. So yeah, I don't know a lot about horse racing, but I don't mind the odd bet on Cheltenham for sure. But yeah, I've not been winning a lot. Let's just put it like that. So I put it down to a bad week, just like my football team at the moment.
We've had John in tonight as well, of course, the Carlisle fan. Thanks for tipping Carlisle to lose with our leaky defence loop. Good win at Aldershot. I will give you credit for that. You've actually done the double over them now. But what I will say on that, just because you've got a clean sheet doesn't mean that you don't have a leaky defence. I genuinely still stand by that. I think that is your weak point this season, is the defence. Lee's also said, I had a £50 going on home, but the Lee and it won at 40-1. We've had two Aldershot fans in as well tonight. Hiccups with us, of course, has his own channel, Up the Shots. Welcome to the stream, Hiccup. And then we've had Caroline as well, of course, a channel member. Good evening from, of course, on behalf of Aldershot. But no, I suppose looking at other games that we could talk about on Tuesday, you would probably look at this Carlisle-Aldershot game. I don't know about you. Of course, we had a result where we both felt that there could potentially be a bit of an upset, and mine would have been Carlisle versus Aldershot. I really did feel that there was an upset on the cards then. I can't remember, was that yours or?
I think that was both of ours at on the last podcast. I think we were quite fearful for Carlisle after not so much the result, but the way that they sort of threw away the 2-goal lead on Saturday, obviously against Southend. But what I would say is that is a fantastic result. Aldershot is no easy place to go this season at all, particularly not in the last few months under John Coleman. I've watched the highlights back. It looked like Con Clark was back to his best. Couple of great free kicks for the goals. So credit to Carlisle, they'll be buzzing with the win and obviously the clean sheet. Morgan Feeney, another goal for him. I know we spoke about him last week on here of his qualities. Great header into the bottom corner. So yeah, Carlisle will be happy with that, particularly with Boreham Wood slipping up away at Woking. I say slipping up, they were down to 10 men for a big chunk of that game, of course, but they've still dropped 2 points. And that puts Carlisle 4 points clear now in terms of finishing third. So they'll be delighted with that. It's a really good midweek for them. Important that they bounce back as soon as possible, really, from the weekend.
Yeah, I think they deserve an enormous amount of credit for that one. That was a game where I was really confident Carlisle were going to slip up. And to be fair to them, they got a convincing win away at Aldershot. And like you said, it's no easy place, particularly at the moment under Joe Coleman. Moving on to the next comment that we've got here. We've also had Mickey in tonight, of course, a Gateshead fan. Evening, gents. The playoffs just out of reach for the Heed now. Heed have been given hope. Great point at Southend, though. And speaking of Southend as well, we've had a Southend fan from Bratislava. Evening from Bratislava. It's looking like the Halifax versus Southend United last game of the season could be a playoff decide. I think it's the second to last, or hopefully with the same outcome as last season. We could both still get in if Forest Green or Scunthorpe potentially have a major drop-off. But I think it's probably looking like it could be one of the two. But I want to talk a little bit about that Tuesday night game, and I'm going to throw you under the bus again. To be fair, I actually agreed with you, thinking that although Gates have improved, I didn't expect them to go all the way to Southend and pick up a result. I watched quite a large proportion of that game. And for me, when I look at Southend as a footballing side, it just feels like they struggle to put the ball back in the net when they're creating chances, if that makes sense. They took the lead, kind of a mistake by Gateshead, but it was a very, very good chip by Andrew Dallas. But it felt like after that, they were in control, and then a set piece just before half time, and Gateshead got the equaliser. I suppose what's frustrating, though, from that perspective is although they dominated that first half, the second half, they didn't go on to win the game. And I felt they were going to go on to win the game, although Gateshead equalised. But a great point for Gateshead, but a disappointing result for Southend, dropping points against Gateshead and Truro in recent weeks on home turf.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly with the Gateshead and Truro games being two of their games in hand as well. They'd have almost have been better off winning one and losing one rather than drawing both. You look at the chances that they've created in both of them games. They've had enough chances to win 3 or 4 football matches in the end. Um, for Gateshead, they just keep proving people wrong at the moment. We keep I keep writing them off, and they keep going and getting results out. I feared for them on Tuesday more for the travel as much as anything else in terms of how far that is on a midweek. It's a very long bus journey that, and I just thought Southend would be buoyed from Saturday really picking up that point at Carlisle, but I was proved wrong there. Um, Great goal from Andy Dallas in the first half. Great chip over the goalkeeper. But they'll be frustrated taking the lead and not seeing out that game. Um, yeah, I said Southend would do it. I said they'd sort of sneak the seventh spot. But they do need to start winning football matches, and they need to start taking advantage of the games in hand that they've got. Otherwise, they're going to struggle to do it. They're going to end up finishing eighth at this point. Yeah, I know they got booed off on Tuesday, and to a certain degree, I can see why, because they're a big football club. They've got big expectations, and they will be expecting to win them sorts of games. But what I would say is they have created a lot of chances in the last few weeks. They just need to start putting the ball in the back of the net. To be honest, that's the main issue for Southend at the moment. But fantastic point for Gateshead. Obviously, they're still in the relegation zone at the moment, but their fans will be proud of the spirit and the fight that they're showing. There's a potential they could do that. Something very similar to what Boston did last season, and actually escape the drop. So they'll just be proud that they're back in the mix now, at least, and the players are quite clearly leaving everything out on the pitch every time they step over the white line. So yeah, massive credit to Gateshead. I know they've got Sutton at home at the weekend, which is a game they need to get at least a point from, if not obviously 3 points. And they'll be right back in the conversation then, particularly with Brackley losing in midweek again as well. That's 6 in a row for them. So, yeah, it's getting interesting at the bottom. There was a point a few weeks ago where the whole bottom four looked completely sort of doomed. Whereas now I think it's probably only Truro that we can say are definitely going down. I don't think there's anybody else that we can say have got no chance if they put a run of just 2 or 3 wins in a row together, really.
Yeah, it's just seen out of those sides who it could be, or could even a Yeovil get sucked into this relegation battle, which I won't put past them. Even Eastleigh, I know they won against Brackley in midweek, but that could be not midweek, sorry, before that. But that could be a damaging result for Well, it is a damaging result, but what I'm saying is it doesn't necessarily mean Eastleigh, are safe now either. Just finally on Southend, when I look at their upcoming games, this is what it doesn't concern me because I'm a Halifax fan, but if I was a Southend fan, what would concern me about them is you've got Forest Green coming up and Rochdale. Rochdale is one of the games in hand. Now, if they don't pick up any points against those two sides, which I'm not saying they're not going to, we're going to come on to predictions shortly, and Halifax beat Bournemouth, which for Halifax is a very, very tough game. But if Halifax beat Bournemouth and Southend lose the next two, then it's in Halifax's hands then to finish 7th this season. And it just feels ridiculous considering the gap not so long ago. Do you still have quite a lot of confidence in Southend, maintaining, climbing back into 7th and being able to maintain it? Or do you think it could be a lot closer than we potentially originally thought a few weeks ago?
At this moment in time, I don't have confidence in any of the teams in and around that playoff conversation. Going even sort of Forest Green in fifth are not convincing at the moment. Obviously, they've won the last two, but they've not been in great form since January. Obviously, Scunthorpe haven't been in great form since the start of February. Halifax, I think it's 2 wins from 8. I think Southend is 2 wins from 9. Hartlepool aren't winning enough games. So I think it's a really inconsistent division, particularly around that area at the moment. So I don't think anybody's really grasping the opportunity, or so to speak. I would still go with Southend to finish 7th. The only doubt I've got is obviously not putting teams like Gateshead and Truro away at the moment, and they're still in the FA Trophy, and I don't know if that will become sort of a distraction in these next few weeks, and that, you know, all their focus will kind of go on to that semi-final. They'll end up sort of dropping a few more points in the league, which, as you say, will let Halifax right back into it. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. I said this last week. I wouldn't be too surprised if the winner of the Halifax and Southend game on the second to last game of the season actually decides who ends up getting in there. It's that close at the moment. It's tough to call. You can make an argument for both sides, and that'll be perfectly reasonable. But yeah, I think Southend have still got the edge even after the last couple of results. But Halifax, they'll be satisfied with what's gone on around them in the last couple of weeks. I mean, I said to you on Tuesday, it was a good night for Halifax without kicking a ball, really. Just psychologically, that they'll have been looking at that and thinking, yeah, we're happy with that. Scunthorpe have lost, and Southend have been held at home to a side in the drop zone. So yeah, good week for Halifax without kicking a ball in the end.
Yeah, it certainly was. We've also had a York City fan in said, up the city, York hopefully to smash the shots on Saturday. We've had Lewis, who's a Scunthorpe fan. He said, we are going to need a win at home to Alty on Saturday to make sure we stay in the playoffs. Just from an outside perspective, looking at Scunthorpe, I look at their remaining fixtures, and even if they continue on the same form that they've been on in the last couple of months, I'd still expect them to probably finish inside the playoffs. When I look at some of the sides, you know, they've got to play. There's a lot of sides towards the bottom, and a lot of sides as well who probably aren't going to have much to play for in the next few weeks when they confirm safety. I've got confidence Scunthorpe will maintain in the playoffs because there's such a gap between them and Halifax and Southend. My concern is, I feel in the playoffs, if you're heading into the playoffs, particularly when you're 5th, 6th, 7th, you need to be going into the playoffs in form. You need to have momentum. And my concern with Scunthorpe is it going to be a case of them stumbling into the playoffs, then going into the playoffs and you know, running out of steam? And that's my slight concern at the moment from an outside perspective, because, you know, if we look at the form of the last couple of months, they won't be in the playoffs now. If the season had started a couple of months ago, it's that first half of the season when, you know, you were almost undefeated for the majority of that first half of the season. And it just feels like in the second half, you've really fallen off a cliff, which, of course, does happen when, you know, sides around you are able to significantly strengthen compared to yourselves who don't have the same sort of budget. And as we say, Scunthorpe have done an exceptional job this season, even if they don't finish in the playoffs because of the budget they've got. First season back in the National League, we know they're going to grow. But for me, I have confidence they're going to finish in the playoffs, but I do think they need to be going into those playoffs with momentum. Otherwise, I think they'll get knocked out straight away. And I think it's a similar story with Forest Green Rovers as well. We've also had in Hiccups come back in, and he said, good afternoon from Ecuador, gents. Aldershot are finally looking for a mid-table finish after being 7 points adrift. Hopefully we can kick on next season. I think if you keep the current manager, I think Aldershot will certainly kick on next season. And also, I think there's no real concern for me about relegation. I know there's 3 defeats on the bounce, but, you know, you look at the opposition who they've played. I don't think you can really judge them on that at the moment. I think the form prior to that is probably done enough, and I expect you guys to be able to stay up. But hope you're having a good time in Ecuador. I can't wait to get out of this country at some point and get abroad. I can't lie. And then we've also had John, who's in. Tamworth plastic pitch is a concern on Saturday for Carlisle. Am I right in saying the only plastic pitch left in this division, I know it's off the top of your head, but only plastic pitch left in this division is Tamworth's? And if that is the case, Carlisle haven't actually played on a plastic pitch for a very long time, if that's the case in a league match. Or is this someone else? I feel like there's someone else as well.
I don't know if is Truro a plastic pitch, or are they still grass? I'm not too sure on that one. I don't know if Truro have got an artificial pitch or not. I believe they have.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've heard that somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure on that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, if it's not, I'm quite confident now you've said it. I think True Road do have a plastic pitch, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be the first time they're on a plastic pitch this season, Carlisle. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to that. And then we've had Halifax won't beat Bournemouth. They are a tough side. I'm not underestimating Bournemouth at all as a Halifax fan. I've been really impressed with them this season, and they're a bit of a dark horse for me in the playoffs at the moment, of a side that could potentially go up. The Heed Army podcast is also with us tonight, Gateshead fans. Hello, boys. In the world of Will Smith, keep Gateshead out your mouth. Also, leave StreamYard and go to a different one, cheaper and better. Potentially in the future, we may well be doing that after they've put the prices up for StreamYard. But it's good to see you with us, and what a great point for Gateshead. But just on the topic of Bournemouth, I think we need to give them a lot of credit tonight. We're down to 9 men and still managed to pick a result up away at Woking in the last minute. They're just such a tough nut to crack, aren't they? Do you think it's more of a case of Bournemouth getting a really good point, or do you think if you're Woking, you're really disappointed with that?
A little bit of both. I think Woking will be happy with the way they performed and the way that they battled against Bournemouth. I think if you'd have offered Woking a point before the game, they'd have took it. However, if you'd have offered them a point in the 93rd minute or whatever it was, they wouldn't have took it. Obviously, it's always frustrating to concede late, particularly when you've had an advantage in terms of numbers on the pitch for such a long time in the game. The thing with Bournemouth is, I said it last week, they've always got quality at the forward end. The first goal again, Abdul Malik, great work down the left-hand side, puts it across for Matt Rush. I think he's got 22 goals in the league now, which is a fantastic return for him. Cracking season for both of them players that I've just mentioned. Bournemouth are dangerous, whether they've got 10 men, 9 men, 11 men. They're always going to have attacks. They're always going to be dangerous in front of goal. So I think it'll be mixed emotions for Woking. Again, they've obviously put quite a lot into their FA Trophy run this season as well. Doesn't look like they're going to be playoff chasing. I know they've still got games in hand, but I don't think they're going to get close enough to push Southend and Halifax. And equally, I don't think they're going to get sucked into any sort of relegation battle. So again, with Woking, similar to the likes of Solihull and Wealdstone, it's time to start sort of building for next season now. Looking at your recruitment, looking at what you need to strengthen in terms of players in the summer, and getting to work early, really, because you almost certainly know what division you're going to be in. So I think that's an advantage to a certain extent, because you've got a bit more time to recruit, whereas there's a cluster of teams at the top that aren't quite sure what division they're going to be in, and at the bottom, I suppose. Where you're not quite sure what division you're going to be in, so you don't quite know your budget in terms of your numbers and how you're going to prepare for it, really. So yeah, overall, both teams will take a point, I think. Bournemouth definitely with the late equaliser. The only slight disadvantage for Bournemouth, they'll have been hoping for a favour from Aldershot. Obviously the gap's gone from 2 back to 4 now for them, but look, the fact that we're even discussing Bournemouth as a potential 3rd place team is massive testament and compliment to what they've done this season. I don't think anybody expected them to be anywhere near where they are, so massive credit to Bournemouth on a great season, and looks like another sort of mid-table finish for Woking in the end, really.
Yeah, Woking, very underwhelming season, of course. Let Neil Ardley go a couple of weeks ago. We spoke about that on the previous podcast. What came out today, though, were February's monthly awards, and the manager of the month was Paul Hurst. A lot of York fans seem to be a little bit annoyed about that because, of course, in February, Stuart Maynard got maximum points with York City. What's your thoughts on Paul Hurst winning it? Of course, Paul Hurst, since he's come into Boston, it's been an excellent start for them. But, statistically, points-wise, Stuart Maynard should have won it. I'll give my opinion shortly. But, yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I can see both sides. Look, York have been consistent pretty much all season. We've praised York no end of times how good they are, and rightly so, because they've been phenomenal this season. The numbers they've been setting, the goals they've been scoring, all the things that we talk about every week. That's what York are. They're so good, along with Rochdale. I can see why Paul Hurst has got it, purely for the turnaround in results. I
Yeah.
think it's more about where they were compared to where they are now. York winning every game is massively impressive. It's just as impressive, but nobody particularly is massively surprised by that, by York winning most games, and in this case winning all games, whereas Boston, I don't think anybody saw them doing what they're doing at the moment. I think it's more who Boston beat in February, in terms of the fact that they went away to Forest Green and beat them. They went away to Scunthorpe and obviously beat ourselves as well. So, look, I see it from both sides. If I was a York fan, I wouldn't want Stuart Maynard to get it anyway. In terms of the manager of the month curse, you don't want to end up cursed for March anyway. So I'd be quite happy that he'd come second. But Stuart Maynard deserves a lot of credit as well. He's been a fantastic manager. He's not been at York for too long, really, and he took over sort of 4 or 5 games into the season, and he's transformed York into an even better side than they already was. We knew York were a good side, even under the previous manager. But they've just gone to a completely new level under Maynard, particularly after the first few weeks, once he had time to implement his ideas and his systems and everything like that. So massive credit to both managers. Paul Hurst used to be a Scunthorpe manager as well, quite a few years ago. Yeah, and Grimsby. So look, he's an experienced manager, and I think it's a cracking appointment for Boston. Quite similar to Aldershot, really, with John Coleman. Both sides looked in real trouble a few months ago, and now they're almost comfortable in mid-table. So it's a massive credit to both of them clubs. But yeah, to answer your question, I can see why Paul Hurst has got it. Just purely for the results, how many upsets they've caused in February, and the turnaround from the first half of the season, really. So massive credit to him, but credit to Maynard as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'd have picked Paul Hurst just for the turnaround that he's done at Boston. Of course, you could say Stuart Maynard couldn't have done anything else, which I totally agree with. But I suppose what I would say is, he's already won it. And like I've said, with Paul Hurst, I think it says a lot about him as a manager to come into Boston and for the turnaround. And, they're virtually safe, aren't they now? Just a couple more wins and they should be fine. And I think most people will be backing them to do that. So, yeah, I have no complaints with Paul Hurst winning manager of the month. And we're probably at a time now where we can actually get on to the predictions. Before we do that, please remember, everyone, to check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. There's a link in the description for you to do that. You get 50% off your card machine, no contracts or monthly fees. Let's take a look at the scores then from the previous game week between myself and Paul. If I can get it up here, if it actually loads in time, I'm unfortunately going to announce that we are actually level because of the previous game week. If I can just find it here. So for yourself, I suppose you'll be looking to extend it and put Paul in the lead.
Fingers crossed. I've not got much hope, given my predictions the other day, in saying I thought Aldershot were going to get a result against Carlisle, and I thought Southend were going to beat Gateshead. So I've not covered myself in glory, but hopefully I can recover a little bit with these predictions for the weekend.
To be fair, I'd have probably gone for very similar predictions to yourself. So, I can't really say anything on that, to be fair. Overall, for those who want to know how to actually play along, this is how you do that. I'm just going to put the video up shortly for those that do. Of course, for those that have seen it 100 times, they're probably sick of seeing it now, but I'll just get that up here for those who are new to us. Just a few final comments to read out before we get on to the predictions. We've had someone who's new with us tonight, who's a Gateshead fan, has come directly across from the Heed Army podcast. Hello, lads, new to this podcast, coming from the Heed Army podcast early this evening. Welcome to the podcast, and a good time to be watching for the first time after Gateshead's upturn in form as well. Lee's also agreed that it's all about resources and Hurst deserves it. And then we've also had Elena, I believe that is, who said, love your podcast, praying Rochdale drop points against Eastleigh, but can't see it happening, sadly. Thank you for the kind words as well. And I believe we should be ready to get on with the predictions. And we're starting things off then with Aldershot versus Truro. That can't be right. We're at the wrong game week. I do apologise for this. Not the most professional from myself. Let's go back. Yeah, that's game week 46. That's the final game week of the season. The transition's meant to be, so I saw all this out. So that's a bit frustrating, to be fair. Here we go. Wealdstone versus Solihull Moors then. Yeah, what's your thoughts looking at this one overall?
Interesting game in terms of there isn't a massive amount on the line for either side, I would say. 12:30 kickoffs, you're never quite sure what you're going to get. There's been quite a few dull affairs that have been 12:30 this season. I've sort of noticed as the season's gone along. Yeah, tough one to call that. I'll go for a 1-1. I think it'll probably end up being a draw, which I don't think would be a bad result for either side, really. Yeah, it feels like both teams' seasons are almost over. I think Wealdstone will feel like they need maybe 2 more wins just to be sure. But yeah, I would go for a 1-1 draw on this one. I think, yeah, it'd be quite a cagey affair. And yeah, I think both sides would probably take a point at the end of the day.
Yeah, to be fair, 3 of the last 4 meetings between the two sides have actually ended in 1-1. For Solihull Moors, should be safe from relegation. Of course, playoffs is over after the previous 9 games, just 1 win in 9 for them. Wealdstone, maybe potentially when people thought they might just be getting sucked into this relegation battle, they've come out of the blocks and got 2 wins on the spin against Braintree and Tamworth, I believe. So, 2 big wins for Wealdstone. I'm going to go for a different score, but I do agree. I can't see anything else but a draw for this one. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. Get your predictions in, guys, and we will put them out here. Just on Solihull, would you say it's been an underwhelming season for them? Of course, Chris Millington came in and there was a massive boost for them. I actually looked at their squad when they had Tyrese Sinclair there, and he recruited a bit. And I looked at Solihull and thought, they're a bit of a dark horse. I could see them sneaking into the playoffs. And, since Christmas, they've fallen off once again.
Yeah, it's been a strange season for Solihull. They obviously had that really bad start. I remember looking at the start of September and I think they were bottom of the league. And then they seemed to have a really good couple of months. And then, as you say, they've sort of dropped off again now. So I think overall, given the start they've made to the season, I think they'll be okay with being in mid-table. But as we know, in years gone by, Solihull have often been. I remember them particularly the last time Scunthorpe were in the National League. Solihull finished comfortably in the playoffs. So I think they'll be hoping to get back to them sort of levels next season. But equally, they will be happy that they're now pretty much, well, they are basically safe from relegation, because early on in the season they were really, really struggling before they obviously relieved the manager at the time and brought in who was it, Chris Millington in the end. So yeah, they'll be happy in the end that they're comfortable, but they'll want a bit more from their club and their side, I think, next season. But you have to remember with Solihull as well, they're not a massive club. They don't attract too many fans each week, so they are, I would say, still punching above their weight to be comfortable in this level, really, as well. So a little bit of perspective for Solihull is needed, really, as well, I think.
Yeah, I think under Chris Millington next season, I could really see them building on, particularly if he gets back to Solihull, which I think he will do as well. Moving on to the next game, it is of course Aldershot versus York City. It's still, I don't know why, but it still feels like a bit of a banana skin in me, well, with my head, to be fair, overall. Although Aldershot, have lost 3 games on the bounce against sides in the playoffs. Of course, losing to Rochdale, Forest Green and Carlisle. Carlisle and Rochdale both being on home soil. I don't think any of the games were straightforward for any of the sides. I suppose for Carlisle, it kind of was. Rochdale came to life in the second half in that game, and similar story with Forest Green. York coming to this after bouncing back, which they needed to against Eastleigh, of course, conceded early. I just can't see past York's away record when I look at this one. We actually look at York this season, and in a possible of a possible of 54 points this season, they've only dropped 11 points and got 43 out of a possible of 54, which is just ridiculous, with just the one defeat coming away at Bournemouth last Tuesday. So I can't see past York for this one. I'm going to go 3-1. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I would agree with you on this one. I think if you were asking me a few weeks ago, when Aldershot were really on fire, I might have had a different outlook. But I think they've had a couple of disappointing results recently. Obviously, Aldershot will be thrilled that they're almost safe from relegation now. I mean, they looked not dead and buried, but they looked in real trouble sort of October, November time until John Coleman came in. So they'll be happy with what they've done in the last few months overall. But as you say, they're not in great form. And for York, they just can't afford to drop any results now. I know we mentioned it last week as well. Given obviously what Rochdale are doing and the points setting that they're both achieving, they can't afford not to win the game. So for me, I'll go for a 2-0 York. I think it'd be very similar to the Rochdale and Carlisle games for Aldershot. I think they'll have a go. I think they'll be competitive, but I think York's quality will shine through in the end. And yeah, I think York will continue their good run on the whole, really.
Been a lot of goals recently between the two sides. In the last 2 meetings, of course, there was that 7-2 at York, and then the 5-1, I believe, earlier on in the season as well between the two sides. So there could be a lot of goals in this one as well. Boston versus Yeovil. Yeovil, a side that could be sucked into this relegation battle. I think most people would back them to stay up at the moment. Of course, didn't play in midweek. Recently lost to Scunthorpe. They're coming up against the Boston side, who, as we've said, are on great form. Despite that result against Rochdale, they competed well with them and conceded late on. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, this is another interesting one, really. The problem is for Yeovil at the minute is finding a goal scorer, finding a consistent goal scorer. I think Yeovil will be okay in the end. They're a side I'm still not worried about, but a little bit cautious about in terms of saying that I think they're safe, because I don't think they are yet. And I think if they get a couple of poor results, they could easily get sucked back into it. For Boston, obviously still in great form. I know they've had a couple of defeats recently, but on the whole, they have been much better. I think, to be honest, I'm going to go for a 1-1 on this one. I think Yeovil will get a point here. I think Boston, like I say, they have been doing a lot better. But Yeovil need the points more. So yeah, I think there'll be I don't know if it would be a shock. I suppose it'd be a little bit of a surprise. I think most people would have Boston as sort of winners on this one. But yeah, I think it'll be a cagey game again. And I think it'll finish 1-1.
Nick might. I'm going to have to go with it because I can't see anything else. I think it'll be a draw once again. Yeovil lost 10 games on the road this season. But as for Boston, dropping points against Woking, losing to Rochdale, I don't think there's any shame in that. I just think this could be a bit of a draw. I think Yeovil probably need the points, and I don't think a point for either side would be the end of the world, to be honest. Moving on to the next game that we'll take a look at, Brackley Town versus Woking then. Woking should be fine. Under new manager, actually unbeaten in 3, I believe, in the last couple, of course, for them. 5 defeats on the spin, though, for Brackley under the new manager. Do you think, bringing in a manager like Andy Wing, of course, he's a very well-respected manager, but, he's known for his expansive, attacking-minded football. Do you think, Brackley were kind of onto something from my perspective, when you look at them just being really tight defensively? And from what I've seen of them in recent weeks, it feels like they're trying to, play more expansive, play quite attacking-minded football, kind of the Wing, way which we saw of him at Solihull Moors. And if I'm being brutally honest, it feels like this season Brackley don't have the players to do that, and that could potentially be the downfall. What's your thoughts on that, firstly?
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Luke. I said last week when I come on here that I did fear for Brackley. It feels like they've been sliding the table and results for quite a while now. They obviously started the season reasonably well, but they've just sort of gradually fallen away. Look, it's all well and good playing nice, tidy, neat football, and that's great. But at this stage in the season, given the position where Brackley are, they need results now. And even if that means playing some ugly, unattractive football, if that gets you a 1-0 win, that's much more important than going away to Boreham Wood, for example, playing some nice attacking football and losing 5-3, like they did at the weekend. I said I feared for Brackley. I still do, particularly after their result on Tuesday. It looked like they were going to get a point away at Eastleigh, and then they lose it literally last kick of the game. So, I'm really worried for Brackley now. I think they're going to struggle, particularly with Morecambe and Gateshead picking up in the last few weeks. I think Brackley need to go back to basics a little bit, which is kind of what you were saying earlier. I think they just need to go back to being a little bit more difficult to score against, which is something that particularly last season I associated with Brackley in the National League North. They obviously beat Scunthorpe to the title in the end, and they had a brilliant campaign, but they were tough to break down. Whereas it doesn't feel like that's really the case at the moment. They're too easy to play against, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that they are going more expansive. So maybe just need a rethink there, because they've got whatever it is now, nine games to save their season. It'd be a shame for Brackley. Look, they're another side with a small budget. They don't attract too many fans week in, week out. And look, they're doing amazingly well to be at this level, the same as the likes of Braintree and some other clubs as well. So it's mixed feelings about Brackley, but in terms of relegation, I do worry for them, and I am going to predict that I am going to predict for them to lose this game against Woking. I'll go for a 2-1 Woking, I think.
I'm going to look at the positives at Brackley firstly at the moment. What I will say is in the previous 5 games, 6 games, I should say, they've lost 2 games at home, which of course came against Southend, which is a side chasing the playoffs, and they actually competed very well with them. And of course, they lost to Altrincham as well, which was probably disappointed, but Altrincham had an upturn in form. You look at the other defeats: Rochdale, Boreham Wood, Wealdstone, Eastleigh, all away. As well, if you look at Brackley's remaining games, I said this, and I think a lot of people did before ball was kicked this season, is the home form for Brackley is going to be the difference between them staying up and not. They're going to have to make that a fortress, because they kind of have that to their advantage. They can make it ugly, and like you said, I think they do need to go back to basics, particularly looking at these final 6 games. And the final 6 home games, you've got Woking, Solihull, Braintree, Tamworth, Boston, and Aldershot. Like, no disrespect to any of those clubs, but you look at those and you've got Woking, Solihull, and Braintree coming up, which are all favourable games. And then you've also got Aldershot and Boston, who, of course, have improved recently, but by that point will both most likely, in my opinion, be safe, so they won't have much to play for. And Brackley have been a lot better at home this season than they have been away. For this one, I mentioned Woking. I'm still not particularly keen on them, with them sacking Neil Ardley. I know there's been a bit of a manager boost in terms of the interims who've taken over, but I'm still not particularly convinced in terms of the direction we're going to go in as a football club at the moment. I think there needs to be a good appointment over the summer. Of course, Tavon Campbell came in for Brackley again on Tuesday night. He actually scored, didn't he, on his debut against Eastleigh. He's been very mixed at the amount of clubs he's been at. Solihull fans liked him. I think Yeovil fans didn't like him. You've got Rochdale fans who didn't like him. Halifax didn't like him. Wheelstone fans were a bit 50-50 on him. And everyone's got different opinions on him, but he's capable if he can find the right club. And I think it's a big boost for him to score on his debut. I think they're unbeaten. I think they're defeated. The losing streak's going to end, I should say. I just can't see a win. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw for this one overall. Halifax versus Boreham Wood then. I think this will be a good match. I think this is one of the games of the game week. I think both sides like to play quite good football. Both are still playing for things this season at the moment. Boreham Wood looking to hunt down a top 3 finish. Halifax looking to cement their place in the playoffs and make up ground on Southend. I think it'll be an entertaining one. I just can't see Halifax winning or Boreham Wood. I think it'll be a 2-2 draw. I think it'll be quite an entertaining one. This, 2-2. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I agree with what you say about it being an entertaining game. Most Boreham Wood games are at the moment. They are an expansive team. They do play a good brand of football. They have got obviously fast players that can get in behind any defence in this division. But equally, they do leave gaps at the back. They are sort of vulnerable at times, particularly to the counter-attack when they lose possession. So, I think there'll definitely be goals in this. I hope it's not going to be 0-0 now I'm saying this. But, I expect goals in this. I'll probably agree with you, to be honest. I'm going to go with a 2-2. I was toying between that and 3-3, but I think that's probably a little bit much, given that Halifax haven't scored a massive amount recently. So I'll agree with you. I think it'll be a draw, which wouldn't be a disaster for either team. I think both sides could live with that. Obviously, it'd be even better if Halifax could nick it. But I think this is one of Halifax's toughest games that they've got left. So I think you can live with a draw against Boreham Wood, who are a really good side, as I've said a few times. So, I think it'd be a draw, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was 3-2 either way as well, to be honest. I expect goals and plenty of drama in this one.
Moving on to the next fixture, it's going to actually be Gateshead versus Sutton. Sutton are so inconsistent this season. I genuinely look at their side and I think they're capable of a lot more than what they've actually produced this season when I've actually seen them in certain performances. But on other days, they are like a Jekyll and Hyde, aren't they? On other days, they are absolutely woeful. The most inconsistent side in this season, and probably the most underwhelming, I'd say, for me so far this season. Probably even going above Morecambe. Against Gateshead, though, Gateshead, massive upturn in form. Safety is certainly a realistic target. I'm going to ask you actually at the end of the podcast for that bottom 4 predictions, just to keep you in mind. Keep that in mind, and I'll give mine as well. Just me looking at this one. Sutton coming in after a 2-1 win against Scunthorpe. I don't know what you thought of them, if you thought it were more Scunthorpe being poor than Sutton being that good. Gateshead, I saw them against Southend, but, winning at Solihull, winning at Southend, that must take a lot out of you, I think, that in those 2 games, particularly Southend away on a Tuesday night. Back at home, they've been mixed at home all season. Of course, got that second win of the season at home against Braintree the other week in the dying seconds. I really want Gateshead to stay up because I've got friends at Gateshead, but I think Sutton win this one, actually. I'm going to go 2-1 Sutton, but it really does depend which Sutton side do turn up. I think it'll be quite an entertaining one for 2 sides lurking towards the bottom at the moment. A very unpredictable one, I'd say, this. But I'm going to go 2-1 Sutton. How do you see it going?
So I agree with a lot of that in terms of Sutton and them being inconsistent. You only have to look at the last few games. They've beaten Scunthorpe and Hartlepool away, and lost to Morecambe and Yeovil. So you just really don't know what you're going to get from Sutton. They are quite, they put the ball at risk quite a lot, particularly the back three. When it works, it looks great. When it doesn't work, it can be an absolute disaster for them. Um, I, I'm gonna I'm gonna back Gateshead in this one actually. Mainly due to Sutton's recent results, the fact that they've beaten the so-called better sides and struggled against the worse or lesser side, should we say. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Gateshead win on this one. I mean, that would be a massive result if they could pull it off. But yeah, it's one of them. That's a real tough one to call. That could finish absolutely anything because you just don't know what you're going to get from either team. But on the basis that Gateshead are in such good form, I'm going to back them. This is the kind of game that if they do want to stay up, they need to be winning these sorts of games. So yeah, I'm going to back them to do it. I'm going to say 2-1 Gateshead.
Yeah, I did see another side to Gateshead against Southend that I've not seen for a long time, even going back to last season. I thought they really dug deep, if that makes sense, away at Southend. They did keep a lot of the possession, but I don't think it was particularly a crack of what we've seen of Gateshead, even in recent weeks where we've seen them back to playing some nice football. But what I would say is they dig deep, they defended well, and for me overall, they got the equaliser from a set piece as well, and like I've said, they defended well and kept Southend out. So potentially, they could do it again, but this is the hardest prediction of the game week for me. Not just with who I think is going to win, but also the score. Like it could literally be anything. It could be 3-3, it could be 5-3, like we saw v Bournemouth v Brackley. It's very unpredictable this game. But I am going to go for Sutton. I do apologise to the Heed supporters. Moving on to the next game, it's going to be Southend versus Forest Green Rovers. Two sides, of course, one side inside the playoffs. Southend, it is in their hands to climb back into the playoffs with those games in hand. It is worth pointing out, as we do every time Southend coming up against the top 7 opponent, they haven't beaten anyone bar Halifax this season, who currently occupy the top 7. A very, very poor record against sides within the top 7. Forest Green winning against Aldershot, winning against Gateshead. It does feel like now they're back to, I suppose, not fully back to what we saw earlier in the season, but they're back to winning ways. They could, potentially make it 3 wins on the bounce. I don't think they will. I'm thinking another draw for this one, 1-1. How do you see it going?
Again, it's another difficult one to call. Both sides very inconsistent at the minute. You don't quite know what you're going to get again from either. I'm going to back Forest Green on the basis that Southend, as you say, their record against the top 7 just isn't good at all. I mean, it's nowhere near good enough. And I don't think that will give Southend fans a lot of hope if they do make the playoffs anyway. The fact that their form has been, their results have been so poor against the sides around them. I think Forest Green, they're starting to click a little bit again. I've criticised them quite a bit in recent weeks because I feel like they should have been doing a lot better, given the budget, given the amount of players that they've got to choose from. The fact that they should be able to rotate and really go for it every week. They've had some really disappointing results, but the last couple of weeks they have been a lot better. And most importantly, they've shored it up a little bit defensively as well, because they were conceding too many goals. Too many sloppy goals as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go for Forest Green on this one. I think it'll be a good game. I think Southend will have some sort of response from Tuesday. I think they'll play okay and maybe just fall short. So I'll go for a 2-1 Forest Green. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a draw again. To be honest, it's going to be a tight one. I think it'll be a competitive game. Should be a lot of quality on show. There's good players on both sides. It'd be interesting to see how this one pans out in the end.
Lee's coming, who's a Southend fan, still not beat a top 6 team with Mayer's boring one-dimensional tactics and having too many games in hand and no squad depth. Yeah, it seems to have turned a little bit toxic at Roots Hall at the moment with the manager from what I saw, on Tuesday night with the booze and stuff. That squad, when I think about the amount of players that have been there for such a long time and, have been loyal with Southend through some tough times, but just feel like now is it time to potentially freshen it up again if they don't get promoted this season. For me, I think next season there could be a bit of a big change at Southend United, but we'll have to see. But yeah, I'm going 1-1 for this one, and John says it'd suit him just fine as well. Next game, of course, is going to be Tamworth versus Carlisle. We're speaking about plastic pitches as we did earlier. Carlisle going away to Tamworth. It's always one of them, I feel, for top 7 sides. We'll look at Tamworth away and always look at that as like, one of those places you get the 3 points and you get out because it's not going to be a pleasant match. We know what Tamworth are like, and there's no shame in that either. They try to spoil a football match at home and make it physical, particularly against the top 7 sides and the footballing sides in the division. I think Carlisle deserve a lot of credit for some of the recent results in terms of going to Alder shots away from home and winning there. So I think they'll be able to get through this one only just 2-1. How do you see it going?
Yeah, this is one of them. It's an awkward. Going to Tamworth is always an awkward away game. It doesn't matter how good a side you are. They're very direct. They've obviously got the long throw of Tom Tonks as well, which causes no end of problems for sides. So Carlisle are going to have to be at it defensively, like they were in midweek. If they're not at it defensively, they'll get bullied and they'll struggle. I think they'll be okay. I think it'll be a tough game. I think they'll just get over the line. I'll go for a 1-0 Carlisle. But Tamworth have potential to cause real problems. That they've always been a tough team. They did really well last year to finish where they finished, and they're doing well this year as well. To be comfortably in mid-table, they're always punching above their weight. Particularly at home as well. As you say, it's AstroTurf as well, so we'll see how Carlisle adapt to that. I believe Truro do have one, but I'm not actually 100% sure Carlisle have been to Truro yet either. I've got it in my head. I think they might go there at some point in April. I
think it's the final day of the season. I've got a feeling Carlisle have got Truro on the final day of the season. I don't know why, but
yeah, I know it's certainly. I'm sure it's late on in the season anyway. So yeah, they haven't played on an artificial surface this season as well. I think so. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they adapt to that because it is different. It does take a bit of sort of getting used to in terms of the surface. But yeah, I think Carlisle will be okay. A lot of their better performances have actually been away from home in recent months as well. So I think they'll probably prefer being away to a certain extent. So yeah, I'll go for Carlisle just to get the job done. But it'll be a tough game for them, that one.
Next game that we're looking at is going to be Truro versus Hartlepool United. If Hartlepool win their game in hand against Halifax, they will only be 2 points behind them. And everyone's saying Halifax are in a good shot of finishing inside the playoffs this season. For me, I've seen enough from Hartlepool this season to suggest that they're not going to get in the top 7. Way too inconsistent throughout the season. The difference between them and the Halifax, I suppose, is Halifax have spells where they'll go on a 5 or 6 game run or 7 even run of picking up some good results. Hartlepool, they'll win 2 good games and then it'll be back to square one. It just doesn't feel like it's much progression. As for Truro, pretty much down. I think it's worth noting John Askey returning to, I believe, an old club in Hartlepool, if I'm correct. I think Hartlepool win this one just because I just don't think Truro have much to play for, and you'd have to back Hartlepool to win this one. I'm going to go 2-0 to Hartlepool. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree. What I would say is you don't really know which Hartlepool are going to turn up. Again, like you say, another real inconsistent team. There seems quite almost a bit of a negative energy around the club there at the moment. I know they've had their ownership take over, but yeah, something just doesn't quite feel right. I don't know if that's reflected in the fans as well, but they sort of seem like one step forward and two steps back. Sometimes they'll get a good result, and you'll think maybe they're back, and then they'll throw an absolutely appalling performance the week after. So yeah, I'm not sure what to make of Hartlepool really. Truro, I mean, they're all but down. I said that last week, and I'm
Yeah.
still going to stick to that. I think for them to stay up now, it would be literally a footballing miracle, and they'd have to pretty much
It'd
win.
be maximum points. They'd have to win every single game, wouldn't they?
Yeah, or certainly, yeah, pretty much every
Yeah.
game. I just can't see that happening. As I said last week, I do have massive amount of respect for Truro in terms of how difficult it must be attracting players, and then the amount of travel they've had to do this season. It must take it out on the whole club. I mean, what people don't think about is the expense to the football club as well. It must be so expensive going to all of these, particularly the games up north like Hartlepool and Gateshead and Carlisle. You're talking 9, 10, even 11-hour journeys if you get a bad run. So yeah, massive sympathy for them that they just haven't cut it in the end in terms of having enough quality to stay in the division. I think it'll be a difficult game. I think there's never a massive amount of goals with Hartlepool generally. They've had quite a few 1-0 and 2-0. So I'll go for a 1-0 Hartlepool. I think they'll just do enough. I don't think there'll be many goals in this game.
Eastleigh versus Rochdale. Then, of course, Rochdale. It's gone well for them recently with Bournemouth defeating York. Means that there's a little bit of a comfortable gap there for them now. It can be, of course, up to 5 points. Of course, they don't want to drop. They don't want York to better any more of their results. Otherwise, it'll be in York's hands on the final day as much as Rochdale's to win the title. Eastleigh away, though. Of course, Eastleigh come into this after defeating Brackley. I think it's worth pointing out against a better side. They took an early lead against York. Of course, York came back, and it's worth mentioning as well that they managed to pick up a result against Boreham Wood as well. So I can't see past Rochdale. They don't win by many, it doesn't feel like at the moment. I can't see them thrashing Eastleigh, but I think they're going to win this one 2-1. How do you see it going?
I can't back against Rochdale, given the points tally that they've got and how many wins they've had already this season. They've been absolutely sensational, along with York, which we've said many, many times, and I'm sure we'll say it many more times for the next 6 or 7 weeks. I can't see them dropping many points between the two of them. Between now and the end of the season. Eastleigh was the side I said last week I worried for Eastleigh. It was Eastleigh and Brackley, the two sides that I was most worried about. Obviously that winner on Tuesday was massive for Eastleigh. I don't think they're safe yet. I think they still need at least 2 wins. So I'm not going to say it's got them completely out of trouble, but it was a massive boost to them winning that game. I know they beat Truro in the last minute as well a couple of weeks ago. So at least for Eastleigh, they're winning the games that matter most in terms of games at home against sides in and around the bottom sort of 6 or 7. So I think Rochdale will have far too much for Eastleigh actually. I'll go for a 3-0 Rochdale.
It's worth pointing out Carlisle have played in the cup on a plastic pitch. Is that in the National League Cup or this season? Or in previous seasons? Moving on to the next game, it's Morecambe versus Braintree. Now, this is a big game at the bottom. I've kind of written off Braintree, to be honest, this season in recent weeks. And they are still within as much of a chance of surviving as Gateshead and Morecambe, but I just can't see it with them. Very thin squad. I just don't think I think they're going to struggle. I think that Wealdstone result was damaging, and the previous one to that was Gateshead. Those were 2 games where you couldn't afford to lose those 2, and now they're back in the bottom 4 against Morecambe, who are bang on form at the moment under Jim Bentley. I can only see one winner, and I think it'll be a comfortable 3-0 win for Morecambe. How do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm on the similar lines to you, Luke. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Morecambe. I think they'll have too much for Braintree. Obviously, Morecambe are in decent form at the moment. It's probably a good time to play Braintree. They've had a couple of difficult results. It's a massive game for both teams. I think we'll know a lot more by this time next week in terms of the relegation battle and who looks most likely to get themselves out of trouble. Yeah, I'm going to go for Morecambe to do it, actually. I think they're finally starting to sort of get into it in terms of Jim Bentley's football and his style and the way that he wants to play. I always said that I thought that was a good appointment for Morecambe, but I did think it would come too late in terms of saving the season. But what I would say is they've given themselves a real chance now. If they can continue this form for another 3 or 4 games, then they're going to give themselves a real shout of actually pulling out of trouble. So yeah, massive respect to Jim Bentley. He's doing a really good job with Morecambe at the moment. Yeah, 2-0 Morecambe.
I believe Morecambe have a game in hand, don't they? Or is it Gateshead who have the game in hand? I'll have a look now.
I think it's Gateshead. I think I've still got one.
One of them does. Yeah, it's Gateshead actually do have the game in hand, and if they win that, they'll be level on points with. Well, they'll actually be above Morecambe and Braintree, level on points with Brackley, but of course Brackley played the same amount of games as well. Moving on to the next fixture and the final fixture, it's of course the Mighty Irons coming up against Altrincham at home. Altrincham have improved at just 1 defeat in 5 recently, actually won 4 of the last 5 games. As for Scunthorpe, you're better talking about it than me, but you know what I thought was strange was new signing actually on the bench against Sutton after he'd scored 2 goals in the previous game week in the striker. Well, yeah, what were your thoughts on that overall?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's I see it from both sides. It's difficult to change a winning team. That's what I would say. I would have personally started him. But again, it's who you take out the team. Obviously, we played pretty well on Saturday. It was a really good result. And Andy Butler seems quite sort of settled on the 4-3-3 formation in terms of Whitehall through the middle and 2 wide forwards. So, yeah, I wasn't surprised to see him not start the game, to be honest. What I would say is I thought Leo Farrell coming off the bench at Yeovil worked perfectly because Yeovil were tiring at the time and he was able to sort of run in behind the defence and take advantage of that, really. I know everybody says, you know, he should have maybe started that game, but I think if he starts that game, it doesn't pan out the way it has, if that makes sense. So I think they did right, really, in that respect. But it'll be interesting to see what he does on Saturday because Tuesday was just a disappointing night. We weren't at the races at all. So it'll be interesting to see if he does make any changes on Saturday. I know Danny Whitehall did come off with a knock as well to his knee with about half an hour left on Tuesday. So if he's not fully fit, that might make Andy Butler's mind up for him anyway. And then Farrell will be the obvious choice on Saturday. In terms of Altrincham, they've been doing a lot better recently. They picked up some really good results. I think the positive for Scunthorpe is that Declan Howard's been scoring a lot of them goals for Altrincham. And obviously he can't play on Saturday with him being our parent club. So be interesting to see how Altrincham deal with that in terms of the centre forward position, if they can find the goals from other players. Really, I think that's a big advantage for us on Saturday, I would say. I think it'd be a tough game. It's also Community Day at Scunthorpe, so there should be a bigger than usual crowd, hopefully. I'm gonna go. I think it'll be a really tough game. I don't think it'll be comfortable at all. I'm going to back us to do the job just. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Scunthorpe, but I think it'll be a really tough game. We're obviously low on confidence at the moment. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy at all. But I hope we can just get over the line, hopefully.
Thinking a draw myself. I'm probably going to go a 1-1 draw for this one. Overall, looking at it, you know, Altrincham not in bad form themselves at all. Obviously with Scunthorpe just been so inconsistent, haven't they, over the last couple of months? It's really hard to predict with them, I feel. And as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, you just hope for their sakes that they get a bit of momentum going into those playoffs. Because it would just be a shame, wouldn't it, if they're going in not bang off form. I don't even know what it is with Scunthorpe. I don't know if you could answer this question, because I looked through and you've not had like any significant injuries at all, I don't believe, where players have come out. I find it quite interesting that, of course, I know Danny Whitehall's been out early on in the season, but he's back now. Cal Roberts has stayed fit, which is crucial, I feel. I know defensively has been one of the major issues, but the first half of the season you were pretty comfortable in both departments, and I'm not saying you've fully fallen off, but there's certainly been a bit of a downhill second half of the season compared to the first.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have got a few injuries at the moment defensively. We're missing Will Evans at the moment, and JB, John Bellahoon, is also out injured, or has been out injured at the moment. So we are missing a couple defensively. What I would say is we haven't been leaking goals freely in the first half of the season, but we were still conceding too many goals. We've never been particularly great defensively. I think we've only kept 6 clean sheets this season, and a couple of them have been in the last month or so. So, yeah, it's not enough for a side in the playoffs. I think Forest Green will probably say the same. They're not keeping enough clean sheets either. So, it's a difficult one. I've said for a little while now that I think we do need a centre half. It's great that we're strengthening in the forward areas. We brought Pat Jones in the other day from Chester, who looked a real live wire. We obviously brought in Connor Smith in January as well. So we're making some really good attacking signs, but I still say that we need a centre half. I think Andrew Boyce, he's struggling at the moment. He's obviously not the youngest anymore. He's struggling for pace. What I would say is that's what Sutton caught us out with a little bit on Tuesday, in terms of they had a lot of pace going forward with their front 3 or 4 players. And Brandon Horton's doing a good job, but he's actually a left back at Trade. He's not a centre half. I still think we need a centre half before the window shuts. Obviously, there's only a couple of weeks until that deadline finishes for National League clubs. So hopefully we can get something in. Particularly at centre half. I mean, I would argue we potentially need a little bit of help at full back as well, but certainly a centre half if we can before the window shuts. But obviously that's easier said than done. If these centre halves are playing regularly for the teams, it's very difficult to attract them to come to a different club, in the middle of March. So it is difficult. It's easy for us to sit here and say we need this and we need that, but I understand it is difficult, particularly on a limited budget. It's hard to attract players. So yeah, I still think we need a centre half, but we'll see how we go on Saturday, I suppose. But Altrincham will be a real tough game. They beat us as well, actually, in the return fixture, 4-2. Certainly not taking them lightly. They've had another good season, really, and they should be proud of themselves as a club, the way they've conducted themselves and some of the results they've had. Really, they've been a breath of fresh air, really, for the division.
Looking at bottom 4 predictions then, before we bring things to a close, do you want me to go first, or do you want to give your bottom 4?
I'm happy to give my bottom 4. So Truro, I think, nailed on. I'm gonna say Gateshead still go down. I predicted them to win on Saturday. It's a tough one to call. If you'd asked me this a couple of weeks ago, it would have been a fairly simple answer, but it's much more difficult now. So I'll go for Gateshead. I'll go for Truro. I'm going to go for Brackley. I think they're going to end up going down in the end, given their current form. Then it's between Morecambe and Braintree, isn't it? So that's a real tough one.
Is it?
Just I'll go for Morecambe to stay up. I think it could easily go to the last day, though. I know you're worried about Braintree. They're not in great form. They're not scoring enough goals, which is the concern for them. I still think they'll pick up a couple of results from somewhere where maybe you're not necessarily expecting them to. So yeah, it's a tough one. But I'm going to go for Morecambe just to survive and finish 20th.
I think the only thing in Braintree, I'm actually surprised because I've got Braintree nailed on to go down. I think, if anything, I've got Truro, obviously, they're gone. And then I'd have Braintree next, to be honest. The only thing Braintree have got is they've got experience of being in these positions before and pulling out of it. I just look at Gateshead and Morecambe, the momentum those two sides are on. I think it's going to be one of the two that survive. I think Brackley, I wouldn't rule them out yet, to be fair. They're the ones where I think, like you with Braintree, Brackley, I think that the home games could be big. I feel, particularly, with them having 6 remaining against all being quite favourable fixtures. But I'd probably still have them to go down. And then I'd have to go with Gates. I just think Morecambe on paper probably have a better side, I think, on paper. And I think now they've got a good manager under them, I'll back them. Something I would say, though, is I look at Yeovil and even Eastleigh, and I know there's a bit of a gap between those two, but I think they could get sucked into it still, to be honest. They're two sides that have never really feared relegation all season, and we've seen it time and time again where sides throughout the season seem fine and they get dragged into it in the final few game weeks and they go down. Happened with Yeovil when they came down with Scunthorpe last time. It's happened to Bournemouth and it's happened to Dagenham as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two get sucked into this relegation battle, and that might change very soon. But at the moment, I think I'd have to go Truro, Braintree, Brackley and Gateshead to go down, unfortunately. And I think Morecambe will survive with that current squad under Jim Bentley overall. But no, that more or less wraps up the podcast. Ryan, thank you very much for stepping in tonight to co-host the show with me and giving your predictions.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Luke. Really enjoyed it again. It's always good talking about the National League. It's been a fantastic season. I know not every club will think that, but I think in terms of entertainment and value, it's been a really good season. It's been a really competitive league. There's nobody that can't beat another side. There's no sort of nailed on every week. You just never know what you're going to get in the National League. It's unpredictable, and that's what makes it great, I suppose. You've obviously got the two sides at the top doing what they're doing as well. So, it'd be interesting to see how the weekend pans out. In terms of our relegation predictions, I think we might have a little bit of a clearer picture in a few days' time when some of these big games have taken place over the weekend. But, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Once again, thanks for joining us, Ryan. And also thanks to everyone that's tuned in tonight to come on and tune in to tonight's podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. It genuinely does go a long way if you can help us. As I keep repeating, we are trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of the season. So if someone hasn't subscribed yet, please do. Also, if you're watching this as a podcast afterwards, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Put your predictions in below for this game week 2. And also check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. Once again, thanks to everyone that's tuned in, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.